So this is our first community collaboration series for the 23-24 school year. And we're really lucky to have Leanne Foss from Lindamood-Bell presenting with us as our first session again this year. She was our first session last year as well. And today she's really just going to focus on imagery, what imagery is, what connects to all of these essential skills, all the way down to real life practical application that you all can use it at home to support your children. So with that being said, Leanne, I will pass it over to you.
Hi, so I'm Leanne Foss. I am the Center Director at Lindamood-Bell in Charlotte. We have centers all over the world that work on helping children learn to read and comprehend. I've worked here for 15 years, and it's been really exciting to get to be a part of the community. And I love that the Crosland School in Cary developed this community series because I feel like it connects us. And one of the things that I think that many of us have in common when we're working with children with different needs is we feel like we're on our own island. And this helps bring the word out into the community and feel supported. And so I appreciate that, Carrie. So thanks for having me. What I really want to focus on is not technically what Lindamood-Bell does as a whole, but more on all the research that we've collected over the years and how that impacts what we know about students who are struggling to either learn to read or comprehend, and then extend that to ways that you can probe for that imagery within your own children, but also start to use some of that imagery language yourself to help elicit more independence within the skills you're wanting from them. So that's our goal today. So I'm going to start by just talking about the things that we asked ourselves. What is the pillar of our research here at Lindamood-Bell? And it's that we've worked for more than 30 years. We've worked with thousands of individuals of all ages, from ages 4 to adults, with different levels of learning challenges. Sitting across from a child or an adult struggling to read words or comprehend a paragraph provided us with a unique insight into the underlying sensory cognitive processing foundation to learning. And that's what we're going to talk about today, the underlying sensory cognitive processing that is creating that foundation for learning.
And Leanne, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. Just so you guys know, I'm controlling her slides as she talks. So if it seems a little disjointed, and if you want me to switch the slide or go back or something, just let me know. And I apologize if that feels a little.
That's fine. That's fine. So the questions that we started with our research was we questioned, we instructed, and we researched. And the questions that we asked are on the next slide, Carrie. Why could some children learn to read from an early age, others could not? This is a really frustrating question that lots of mothers ask themselves. You can stand in the lobby of any school and you'll hear a bunch of parents saying, oh, my child was learning and reading words at 2 and 3 years old. And others that are standing there and their child is in 2nd grade or 3rd grade and they still aren't a fluent reader. And so we wanted to know why. What was the reason? Because the thing that all of these mothers had in common is that they love their child and they've given them lots of support in this area, read lots of books to them. They've exposed them to all of the things that we as parents should expose our children to, and it still was hard. Why did some children decode below their potential, unable to catch up despite years of special education, reading programs, and/or private tutoring? That's a really good question that lots of families ask. Why did some individuals struggle to memorize sight words and others just had them? Why did some read text easily yet struggle to comprehend what they read? Right? The only reason we read words is to comprehend. So if you can read the words but you don't understand them, you're still not a fluent reader because the words don't really make sense. Why were some still analytical readers rather than global readers at the end of phonological instruction? And what this question is asking is we all start by sounding out words. So your child may be able to go k, at, t, and sound that word out. But if they have to do that every time they see every word, they'll never really be a fluent reader. That analytical reader means they're really analyzing the letters and hyper-focusing there instead of being able to understand what those words are meaning because it's taking so much effort, even though they've gotten lots of instruction on sounding out words. They're not really moving past it. What was the primary cause of dyslexia? Could the cause be identified and remediated so dyslexia would not need to be a lifelong struggle? That's the real question that we want to find the answer to. We learned sensory input is the primary foundation of cognition and successful learning. We learned that our experience matched a general theory of cognition, which is the dual coding theory. The dual coding theory is a theory that was developed by Dr. Alan Pavio. And what he says about that dual coding theory is cognition is proportional to the extent that the coding mechanisms of mental representation or that imagery that we're talking about and language are integrated. Performance is mediated by the joint activity of the verbal and nonverbal systems. So that imagery that we're talking about, those verbal and nonverbal systems, you need to be able to be making this movie in your head. So you're seeing the nonverbal system, and it's got to connect from what you're hearing, what you're saying, and what somebody else is saying, or what you're reading to make that imagery. So those two worlds really have to connect and interact in order for us to have global understanding. So what are those three sensory cognitive functions that he's talking? What is that imagery that we keep talking about? So there are three basic imagery pieces that have to be working with us at optimal level in order to support the skills that you're looking for in school. And if these three areas are working well for you, that's a parent that's standing in the lobby going, my child was reading at 2 or 3. We didn't really have to do anything because those were all working. We just had to expose them to books, to words, to language, and they would just pick it up and absorb it. But then what happens if that doesn't happen for your child? It's usually related to one of these sensory cognitive functions. The first one that we all start working on in school when we start in kindergarten, first grade, is your phonemic awareness. It is the ability to perceive the identity, number, and sequence of sounds within words. So you have to be able to take that word cat and go at cat to get that new word off the page. That's your phonemic awareness. But that's not enough to be a good reader. If you stop right there, you can sound out words. What you really need to do then is marry that with the visual area of your brain, and the sensory cognitive function that's happening there is your symbol imagery. And that is your own chalkboard in your head, basically, where you can see those letters. So as I decode that word cat for the first time, I should also be able to pull up my own chalkboard or my picture in my mind's eye and see those letters of that word cat. So now the next time I see cat, I don't have to go back to using my phonemic awareness to sound it out. I now have it stored as a sight word, and I can just automatically recognize it like I recognize my name. That interaction between those two is really important because you have to be able to sound out words and then store it as a sight word. That's also what supports our spelling. It supports, so many things. Memorization of math facts. 3 times 3 is 9 every time. That's very similar to a sight word. It's just in a number format. So that symbol imagery is being employed for that task as well. But that's speaking about the skill of reading fluency. We still need to understand what we're reading, and that's where our concept imagery comes into play. It is the ability to create an image to gestalt or whole for oral or written language. So now, instead of seeing those letters in our mind eye, we're making this really vivid movie in our mind that involves all kinds of colors, movement, so that we can then look beyond that and go, what are we going to predict is going to happen next? The movie stopped here, but we got to predict what's going to happen next if we stay on this path. If you have that movie created, you can see beyond that and start to really understand higher order thinking questions. So let's break down and dig into that 2 types of imagery because it controls so much of what's happening in our brains when it comes to the skills we're looking for in school. We have those basic 2 types of imagery. On one side, we have Buzz, and he was really a student here at the Lindamood-Bell Charlotte Center. And you can see he's imaging those letters for that word short on his chalkboard or in his mind's eye. That's using his symbol imagery. That's what we would consider the parts of reading, is being able to image those letters. And the thing about those parts is they're not dynamic. They're very static. They never change. You spell short the same way every time. But then on the other side of the line, you have Natalie, and Natalie is using her concept imagery to image that whole of what's happening. So she's got a clown in her story. She's got the color of his hair, his overalls. She's imaged a bull. She's imaged the cowboy. And so she can understand this whole. If she didn't image all of the pieces, let's say she left the bull off and she just didn't make a solid picture of that when she was reading about this story. And then I ask her, what's the role of the bull? Right? The whole doesn't make as much sense. But so that's something that is dynamic. We have to continually change our movie or our picture as we know more information, as the story tells us more, as the person who's speaking to us tells us more. We've got to adjust. Maybe in the beginning, the story didn't tell us what color the clown's hair was, but later in the story, it does. So Natalie might have started out imaging her clown with purple hair, but now she's read more into the story and it's just, it explicitly says it's got red hair with green overalls. She's got to make that change in her story, in her movie, so that she can recall that detail and grow with this story. So it's very dynamic and something that's always growing and moving with us. When you think about the symbol imagery with the words, their phonological and orthographic imagery for reading and spelling is that orthographic memory. So you might get on your psych ed testing where they talk about the difference between that phonological and orthographic imagery or decoding. It's really trying to let you know whether it's more in this decoding piece or if it's more in the spelling side with encoding or if it's storing sight words, and where we really need to tailor our instruction to help that child get past what is their struggling piece. So how do we do that? We want our students to use our imagery. So one of the ways that we check and see what imagery looks like is we might show a card like this. Carrie, you got that card in your head? You're taking a picture with your mind's eye? Go to the next slide. What was the fourth letter you saw? What was all the letters you saw?
F-L-I-S-P.
See how she's looking up? She's checking her imagery. Just her taking her eyes and moving up, that's a sign that somebody is using their imagery and actively using it. That was not a word. So none of those, that doesn't really play fair in her mind as a word, but she was still able to hold on to all of those letters. What if I asked you to give me the letters backwards? Could you do that? That's a lot more challenging.
E-S-I-L-F.
She did it, right? Because she has that imagery. That's another way that we
Putting
check
me on the spot this morning.
I know, but look, your imagery is intact. That's why you were an English major. Okay, go to the next slide. That's just a way to check your imagery. And oftentimes when you look at that imagery for a child, you may see that Carrie could hold on to that. But let's say I got to a word like aption, and that's beyond her imagery. She might get those first couple of letters and drops off that last syllable and tries to fill it in with something to make a guess, because her imagery isn't taking her there and she's trying to make those guesses and make that connection. So what are some symptoms of weak symbol imagery? Weak reading skills, word attack or word recognition, orthographic awareness, phonological awareness, memorizing sight words. That's a huge one. And oftentimes our students that have this issue are really good at memorizing, because memorizing is what has gotten them through, because that symbol imagery isn't there for them. And so oftentimes what that looks like when you're studying sight words is, I studied all week with my child and now we're at the end of the week and they go take that spelling test and they miss half of them. I don't believe they didn't know them. Well, when you're working them, they're memorizing those words, memorizing them words. As soon as you put them away, our brain doesn't hold on to things by memorizing. We actually use these imagery. Everything in our brain is stored through imagery. So then when they try to recall it back up, they miss some of those letters, or they're confused, or they put the first letter last or the last letter first, or they miss the vowel. And it feels really frustrating and feels like a focus issue, and it's not a focus issue. It's an imagery issue. Their fast, accurate decoding is not there. Also, self-correcting isn't there, where they'll just read over a word and just keep on going. They get to that word again in the next sentence and they just read it the same way that's missed and just keep on going. That's a sign that they're not really able to compare and contrast with their symbol imagery to make those corrections. Their contextual reading is really based on guessing rather than rapid, accurate decoding. And then spelling, of course. Concept imagery, what does that look like? We're trying to get students to image a whole for comprehension and thinking. So bringing us back to Natalie with that clown, it's very vivid. Lots of the colors are there. She sees that whole clown and she's picturing this clown in a ring, right, in the circus ring. But if you have weak symbol imagery, what might be challenging is a student might be picturing a ring like a hula hoop or something if they don't really have that image of what a ring in a circus would look like. It doesn't look like a hula hoop, it's just the floor. And so here is a example of that. So here is just a paragraph. The big black horse ran across the green field with his head held high, his hooves pounded the ground, and his thick mane blew wildly in the wind. Okay, so Carrie, take that away. I'm going to use you as my student again. What does that story make you picture?
I picture a large horse.
Okay. What did you picture for what the horse was doing? What was his movement like?
Was running.
Okay. What do you picture? Do you picture anything going on around him? Like, do you hear anything or see anything? He's just running.
I see grass and his legs are moving and his hair up here is like flying backwards.
See how she's really got this picture? She sees the mane flying backwards because that wind rushing past and all of that. She's made this picture. But if she didn't picture any of that and she said, "Oh, I just see a horse eating grass," he's not moving, right? So she didn't picture that whole piece. And so we really want to dig in and maybe, can you go back to that story, Carrie? If we look back, I might ask questions like, did you hear anything? What did you picture for pounded on the ground, the hooves pounded on the ground? What did you picture for that?
Like a knocking sound.
Yeah. Do you picture it going fast or slow?
Fast.
See, so she's creating that imagery. I know now that she knows what pounded on the ground means. But let's say she's just said, what did you picture for the hooves? Pounded on the ground. The hooves pounded on the ground. And she's kept repeating that. I don't really have a clear picture that she knows what that means, that this horse is actually running across the field. So if I ask questions later of where was the horse running to, it just stops there for them because that imagery really wasn't developed. So really asking more picturing questions like, what did you picture for this? Instead of, what do you think for this? Or did you understand that? Because she's just going to say yes. Yep. Yes. Yep. And I don't really have an indication of whether she really has an image of this picture or true understanding to keep building. Okay, Carrie, go ahead. So what this looks like, Natalie, here we have with weak concept imagery, it kind of mimics the saying that maybe you've all heard in the past, in one ear and out the other. If we're just taking in the information and we're really not creating this vivid movie, then we're only going to grasp pieces and parts. And then we really can't get to a place where we can do that higher order thinking of comparing and contrasting, predicting, those types of things that come along with that.
So you kind of, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but I'm just listening to you and you're making me think of my daughter, who is only 4. But even so, you're kind of making me think of when I say, well, what'd you do today? And, she's done stuff all day. I expect an answer and I get, I don't know. Does that fall into the same category of kind of in one ear, out the other, not pulling into that imagery to be able to communicate?
That's exactly right. And what I would do in this scenario, if this were my child and I said, I might start with, what did you do today? Because I want to give her some level of independence. What can she give me? If she says, I don't know, nothing, I'm going to start to drill down on that. I'm going to go, oh, well, who did you sit with at lunch? And she might go, I don't know. I don't remember. I don't even remember what I had for lunch. I'm going to say to her, well, close your eyes and picture Because she's 4, I want her to close her eyes. I probably wouldn't say that to a 4th grader, but I would say, picture who you were sitting with at lunch. All of a sudden, you'll see her little eyes go up, and she's like, oh, I was sitting next to Sally. Great. What did you picture was in your lunchbox? Oh, it was a peanut butter roll-up sandwich. I loved it. I had carrots. I didn't eat all of them. Right now, I'm starting to get more information. Well, what did you do at circle time? Picture what you were doing then. What did you learn today? Where were you sitting? What did the teacher say? And then all of a sudden information starts flooding back. It's because I'm drawing her back to her imagery and not asking questions at a surface level. So just changing that question. You think just adding the word picturing into a sentence wouldn't make much difference? It changes everything. I think even about my communication with my husband and I, we've been married for 32 years. And we have had lots of arguments over the 32 years of raising 4 children and, life just doing what life does. All of our arguments, after I started working at Lindamood-Bell, I was like, almost every one of our arguments is because we don't match our imagery. Whatever he has in his head doesn't match what I had in mind. My example of this is we put a pool in our backyard, and he came home and he goes, I have a great idea. And I said, what's that? He goes, I'm going to do what you want me to do. I'm going to make flower baskets outside of the pool with benches. I was like, okay, that's great. I'm so excited. So he goes to Lowe's, and I thought, I'm going to come with you. And he picks out these huge, like big, huge panels of wood. And I'm going, what are we doing with these? His picture was he would put a panel of wood up against the side of the pool, fill it with dirt, and the flowers would come out the top. That is not what I was picturing. I don't want that at my pool. That is not what's happening at all. What I wanted was a flower pot, a bench to sit, a flower pot, a bench to sit, a flower pot. So now we're spending 20 minutes in Home Depot arguing because we didn't have the same image to begin with. So we don't have the same goals. We're not buying the same materials. We're not even on the same page. Then he shuts down because I'm criticizing his idea, right? When we want to get to at the very beginning, kind of being more clear of what our picture is, but also making sure that the person that we're talking to got the same picture. So we're moving in the same direction. So we're really looking at that imaged whole. And that's what this picture is showing us. We got the higher order thinking. We can get to main idea, conclusion, inferences, predicting, extending, evaluating, all of that executive function type of stuff that you want, organization, remembering what I need to take today for school because I have soccer after school, remembering that I have phys ed today, so I need to have my uniform or whatever I wear for that. Those are all things that are happening once that imaged whole can take hold. So when you think about that executive function is huge in daily life and managing your child. That's probably one of the biggest complaints across the board from parents, if they could just manage their stuff and their life. And we have to get to a place of independence with imagery to expect those things to be able to be there and meet us where we want them to be. So weak concept imagery can be to look like weak written language comprehension, oral language, critical and logical thinking and problem solving. So this really comes into play with math, with breaking down word problems, understanding that there's multiple steps that I have to solve, things like that. Following directions, huge at home, right? Who doesn't struggle with their child following directions? Because you might be battling two things. You're battling your child just being a child and they don't want to pick up their toys. That's just life. Or you may be battling that they didn't really be able to process all those directions, so they just end up dropping them off. And that's the part that we can do something about and control and help with. Expressing themselves orally, expressing themselves in writing, grasping humor. That's another one. If you have weak concept imagery, a lot of our humor is based on sarcasm. Kids with weak concept imagery, they're very literal. They do not get sarcasm. If you say something like, wow, it looks like you brought everything in the kitchen sink, they're going to be looking around for a sink. I didn't bring a sink. What are you talking about? Right? That they didn't bring a sink. They brought all their stuff. Interpreting social situations, that also can come into play with students, because if they have weak concept imagery, they don't always process the facial expressions that the person is giving them. So they don't read those social cues to either let's back off a little bit or let's dig down deeper. I think that I hear my daughter say a lot to her 4-year-old, stop, look at my face. Am I mad? Do I look mad? Okay, I'm not mad at you. I'm just giving you direction, right? Because she'll get really sensitive and upset if Carrie says something like, pick up your clothes or do this. She's not mad. She's just giving her direction. And so drawing attention to that, because they don't often read that. Understanding cause and effect. Mental mapping. Remember when we used to have to write directions down, or we'd print out the directions and we'd have to follow them, but worse, we had to stop and ask people for directions. But sometimes those directions were the best directions, because they would say things like, you're going to go down the street, there's a huge oak tree. Once you see that oak tree, you're going to turn left. And then after you turn left, you're going to see a big red church, and that's where you're going to turn right. Our maps doesn't give us that right now, right? But when you see that oak tree, you're like, I'm on the right direction. You feel better. And so, but you had to be able to keep that mental mapping or that imagery in your head to be able to identify that and follow that. So that is also a big play in this comprehension piece as well. So the component parts of reading. I'm going to wrap it up with this little visual here. This is a visual that Lindamood-Bell uses a lot. We use it to represent our component parts of reading. So if you're taking in everything I said today, these first 3 areas that are highlighted are written with the auditory, visual, and language. Those are the subsets or the parts that we focus on to support reading fluency. So that auditory area is where that phonemic awareness is happening and that word attack is able to happen if that's intact. The visual area is where our orthographic processing happens and our word recognition or our sight word base is built. That allows you to move down to that language area where you are reaching contextual reading. The thing that plays a huge part in all of this is vocabulary. Vocabulary definitely supports your word attack, definitely supports your storage of sight words and being able to recognize those sight words. And so that's really critical in all of these pieces. These subsets is what gives you that reading fluency. But it does not guarantee that comprehension is going to happen. It just sets the stage for it to happen. And then we move to that overall circle of comprehension. And that's where our concept imagery happens. And we're making that movie and we can have understanding. Go ahead. Go ahead. Okay. So if we have our 2 students and we're on the spectrum of life, if you are over on the side where Buzz is, then you have weak decoding and possibly a dyslexic diagnosis, and you need symbol imagery help. And if you're like Natalie, you're on the completely other side of that and you have weak comprehension, and the most extreme weak comprehension that we have in our society can often be labeled hyperlexia or a diagnosis of autism. And so if you're perfect, you're right there in the middle, but all of us are somewhere on this scale. You can have weak comprehension and not have autism because you don't have severe weak comprehension, but it's enough to be problematic for you. Just like you can have trouble with reading and not be dyslexic, but it be problematic enough for you to need help or assistance. For Buzz, if we dig in on Buzz and what we did with Buzz, Buzz was 12 years old. He had a diagnosis of dyslexia. He had many, 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 many years in special education. He had many programs to develop phonological awareness. He did Orton Gillingham, WordWise, all of those phonetic-based programs out there. He had a lot of experience in. But then when we test a student, we're looking at a percentile range. It's either the first to the 100th percentile. So what that essentially means is if we took 100 kids and tested them, and they were all lined up on this chart that we have here, the average range that we want them to fall in is that 25th to 75th percentile, because that is the sweet spot that they can use that skill independently. So anything below that 25th percentile, we're going to consider a weakness and needs help. Anything above that 75th percentile, we're going to consider a strength, and it's something of ease with them. Buzz was 12 years old, 5 months into his 12th year, and he was starting 7th grade at the time that we did this work. we mentioned that 37th percentile because that's really us, really pushes you into that being really where you should be in each grade level. Because if you're at the 25th percentile, you're about a year behind. If you're at the 75th percentile, you're about a year ahead. That 50th is right where you need to be. You know, anything above or below is actionable. So go ahead, Carrie. So we have Buzz here. We did an evaluation with him, and this is just a snapshot of some of those tests. We gave a picture vocabulary test because I talked about vocabulary being so important. Buzz had really strong vocabulary. It's in the 75th percentile, right on the borderline of being an extreme strength for him, right? Or right at that cutoff. His ability to sound out words was at the 95th percentile. So this tells me this child can sound out anything you put in front of him. So all of that phonological awareness programs or based programs worked for him. He can sound out words, but he's still not reading fluently. His word recognition is only at the 37th percentile. So he can sound out words at the 95th, but he only has a sight word base at the 37th percentile. That's a pretty big gap. His reading rate is at the 10th percentile. His accuracy when he reads is at the 25th, and his fluency is at the 16th percentile, even after all of that work. His comprehension, however, is in the average range with that 37th percentile. So this profile tells me that his auditory processing is working in that first circle. It is not marrying and working with that visual processing of that symbol imagery. So he needs work with that symbol imagery to get those sight words up where they need to be so he can pick up this rate and recognize more words automatically, have to rely less on decoding words every time like he's seen it for the first time, and really boost that fluency up. And then what we probably will see, and we did see with him, his comprehension is at the 37th percentile only because the reading gets so hard that he can't answer the questions. It's not because he doesn't understand what he's reading. If you read something to him, he would be very high in that. And so we know where we need to zero in with Buzz and just work on focus on that symbol imagery. We want him to be a global reader. The purpose of being a global reader is that the reading mechanics, the reading fluency is kind of like the refrigerator running all day long. You don't really know your refrigerator's running and doing the work all day long. It's just what the refrigerator does. We need it to be automatic, and we need to be able to rely on it and for it to be solid. And that way it allows the refrigerator to do its job if you open it, right? It kicks in and it does its job. The comprehension can kick in, it can do its job. It's already stable for him, and it's waiting to do that. But we've got to hit that reading fluency in a more meaningful way. Does that make sense? So then we have Natalie. Natalie is just the opposite. Natalie was a quiet, shy 11-year-old in 6th grade. She performs at a high school level in word attack, word recognition, and spelling. Her oral vocabulary is above the normal range, and her paragraph reading is at the 91st percentile. So she can read anything you put in front of her and read it well. Natalie's reading comprehension and ability to follow directions are below her potential. So let's look at Natalie's profile. By the 3rd grade, Natalie's parents were told she wasn't attending and she wasn't completing assignments. By 5th grade, the same complaints continued, but they added that Natalie wasn't motivated anymore. By 6th grade, Natalie began to complain of stomach aches prior to going to school. She told her parents she was dumb. When we look at her profile and we tested her, we were able to dig in. We were able to see that her vocabulary is at the 86th percentile. So vocabulary is definitely strong enough to support these skills. Her word attack was at the 86th percentile. Again, she can sound out anything. Her word recognition is at the 87th percentile. So she has a strong sight word base. Her reading rate is at the 84th percentile. Her accuracy is at the 95th percentile. And her reading fluency overall is at the 91st percentile. She's a solid reader. Reading is not the problem for her. Her comprehension is at the 2nd percentile. So when she says school is hard, it's hard. When she says she has a stomach ache before school, she really has a stomach ache before school. She's not able to keep up with the class. She's not able to keep up with what the teacher is saying to her. She doesn't understand the assignments. And so it looks like Natalie doesn't care. Natalie cares a whole lot. Natalie's just trying to disappear because she doesn't know what to do about this. And so we know that we really need to dig in and get that visualizing and verbalizing going and get that imagery of that movie as she's reading all these words to catch up with that skill so she can understand what she's reading. Concept imagery underlines language comprehension. So imagery for higher order thinking. This is an example of us using that imagery language. So she's got her picture. The question is, from what you pictured, why do you think the clown might be braver than the cowboy? Right? That's a higher order thinking. You got to have a good imagery to be able to answer that question. She says, I think he was braver because he got right in front of the mean bull and the cowboy ran away. Right? If she didn't have this picture in her head, she would not really understand that that cowboy got right in front of that bull to distract him from getting the cowboy right? So it's that imagery is critical to get to that place where we can give a written response like that, but her answer is spot on. Imagery language processing. So just to recap for us, we have Buzz over here with his letters. He's got symbol imagery issues with decoding. We have Natalie on the other side. She has comprehension issues and accessing her concept imagery to make that movie. The one thing that I'm super, super proud of to work with an organization like Lindamood-Bell. I'm super proud of the fact that we get to help children every day. But the part that really, really resonated with me as a parent, the reason I came to Lindamood-Bell 15 years ago is because my child struggled with dyslexic issues and I didn't know what to do about it. I'm an educator at heart. That's the world I come from, and I couldn't solve it for her. Her teachers couldn't solve it for her. The one thing about Lindamood-Bell is we've invested a lot of time and energy into behavioral and neurological research. We've had lots and lots of organizations out there that have done independent data on our students. So we are one of the only tutoring companies out there that is research validated instead of just research based. The difference between the two is research based. I can do the research on our programs. If I have a question with like a hypothesis and I pull the data and I analyze it, it's now research based. Being research validated means that these outside entities like MIT, University of Alabama, University of Wake Forest, they have done their own studies on our programs. They've collected our most dyslexic and our most hyperlexic students out in the communities. They put them into control groups and then they release them into our centers. We didn't know who was in the control group or who was not. We just completed instruction. And they did brain scans of those students before, in the middle, at the end of instruction. But most importantly, after a null period of no instruction being given, to see if the work that we were doing with imagery was actually a permanent change in the brains of the students that we were working with. And the answer to all of those studies came out overwhelmingly in our favor. And here are just a little couple of these snapshots of some of these studies to show you what some of those results look like. So here is a group of kids that were put through the program, through some of those studies. The average hours of instruction that these students got was 112 hours of instruction, and the average age was 10. And you can see that their symbol imagery grew from the 19th to the 58th percentile on average. Their phonological awareness grew from the 27th to the 55th percentile. Their word attack grew from the 12th percentile to the 42nd. Word recognition went up, spelling went up, accuracy went up. And so across the board, our instruction does work. There is a direct response to intensive instruction and amount of growth that happens. And that definitely is proven through all of these studies as well. For this group of students, these students went through our visualizing and verbalizing program. They were working on comprehension. They completed about 98 hours on average, and their age was 12 years old, 5 months in. And you can see that growth with comprehension, oral directions from the 14th to the 30th percentile. That is huge. That will make a huge impact in anybody's home or school. Their word opposites went up, their vocabulary increased. So definitely a snapshot that makes you understand that the imagery is definitely the need. One of the gentlemen, that the scientist that ran one of the studies, was Jason Eatman from the University of Alabama. And what he said after at the end of the study, while many parents and teachers might worry that dyslexia is a permanent, reflecting intrinsic deficits in the brain, these findings demonstrate that targeted intensive reading programs not only lead to substantial improvement in reading skills, but also change the underlying wiring of the brain's reading circulatory, their system. And so that's really, really amazing. The thing that I just joke about this, Jason also said, something that just I couldn't wait to call my dad and tell him. I grew up with a family of electricians and engineers. And so my dad always had this dream that I was going to go on and be an engineer. I'm not an engineer. I don't have the brains to be an engineer, but that was his dream for me. After this study came out, one of the things that Jason said about us is that Lindamood-Bell is our brain engineers. I couldn't wait. I was like, oh my God, I got it. Can you put it in writing? I couldn't wait to call him and tell him I made it. I'm an engineer now. He laughed at me. He said my hands were too clean to be an engineer. So so that's just a little story. The research is really interesting. What I would encourage you to do is definitely go to the Lindamood-Bell website. There's a research tab. You can see these brain scans. You can see all of these research. And I think that that's my biggest thing that Lindamood-Bell just enlightened me, that's one of the things I want to ask people that are working with my children is, what is your program? What is the fidelity of it? What is the research behind it? Because it's easy to get hoodwinked into something that isn't the right fit, because we're mothers and parents, and we would cut off I think everybody in this room would cut off their arm right now with a dull knife if I said I would make your child's life happy and productive, right? Because that's all you want. You want my child to be happy, and I want them to be productive and independent. That's it. I don't have these high dreams that my child needs to be perfect or be the top engineer. I just want them to be happy and productive in their life. And so what I want you to walk away with today is some of the things that you can implement in your daily life right now with your child. Study skills. The more you can bring their attention to imagery, the more they're going to do that automatically without you asking. For example, if a child read a word like steam and the word is stream, I'm covering that word up and I'm just questioning to that. What did you picture after the T in steam? They're going to now have to pull to their imagery and go, oh, an E. Great, let's see if we match. Nope, there's an R there. Let's include it, right? You've helped them identify that error, but they've come to that by themselves by using that imagery, forcing them to use that imagery. When you're working with spelling words, do some of that imagery work. What we would do is, I have some sight word cards here. We would have a card. We'd put all the words on a card, right? So now I have this card. It's not written as neatly as I would like it, but we see those letters. Take it away. Tell me all the letters you saw in some. They're telling you that. Ask a couple questions. What was the third letter? What was the first letter? You're really making them use their imagery. So then when we get to a place where we are studying for that test, by the third or day of studying, I'm going to start by going, I'm just going to give you a mock spelling test of the words we have and see what you have solid, and let's see what we need to work, and start to narrow that down. They'll start to hold those words. If you notice that your child always misses the word was when they're reading, right? They say saw or they say something else. It's always the same word. Capture it on a note card and do some of that imagery work. When you're driving in the car, that's a perfect time to do imagery work. You're stuck in the car. All you can do is talk with each other. Put the tablets down and let's do some imagery work. The whole family can do imagery work with you. I might say, hey, what letters do you picture in the word steam? See who can give that to me. Let's have a contest. Who can get the most points? Just make them use that imagery. The communication back and forth, where you can really tap into that concept imagery piece. I think of things like, when my child was little, she'd come home and go, Mom, we're going on a field trip. I'm so excited. The permission slip was due yesterday, but you need to sign it and turn it in. I'm going to go, wait a minute. Tell me if I'm picturing this correctly. I'm picturing that there's a field trip and you're excited. Yep. I'm really excited. I want to go. I'm picturing they gave you a permission slip. Yep. And I needed to have it in yesterday. So I picture it's late and you're not going to be able to go. No. It's due tomorrow. right? So you went through your imagery, kind of checked it with them. You're not just saying that makes no sense. You're really digging in there. When you're doing something like maybe you're going to plant flower beds in the backyard and your child is a child that struggles with vocabulary, that's a great time to talk about vocabulary. We're going to haul all this dirt into the backyard and I need you to help me. Do you know what hauling means? Do you have a picture for that? They might say no. I'm going to give them a picture right then. Well, hauling is something that you struggle with and you got to put it on your shoulder and we're going to take it into the backyard. Let's see if you can help me haul this dirt to the backyard. But just giving imagery and digging into it, making sure they understand everything. I had a parent come to my office and said, my child, something's off. The comprehension is off. The teacher says they're perfect. They get good grades, but every once in a while they can't do the work in school and they get a really low grade and it's really hard on my child. The teacher says it's attention. I just don't see attention as an issue. So I asked the parent to come in for an evaluation for their child, but I also asked the parent to bring an example of the work that the teacher says the comprehension is intact. And what the parent brought to me was this packet. It was the story about the tortoise and the hare, and then it had 20 questions at the end that were multiple choice. And the teacher's example of why she felt this child had strong comprehension is because she got all 20 questions correct. And she's like, this was a long story for her age group. She read it, she got all 20 questions correct. I said, okay, great. So I sat down with the child, with the mom, and I said, tell me about the story you read. She goes, oh, that was a story about the tortoise and the hare. And I go, great. What are you picturing for a hare? She goes, I have no idea. She had no idea what a hare was. And I said, oh, okay, well, how did you answer this question about the hare? And she goes, well, the question had the word that the animal had fur. And I know a tortoise doesn't have fur. So a hare must have fur. But she still has no idea what the main character in the story is. She doesn't know it's a rabbit. So starting with that basic questioning will help you understand. And if you can front load some of that imagery, right? Let's pull up a picture of a hare. What does it look like to you? It's just a very large rabbit. Great. Give me 3 clues. I'll close the picture now and say, give me 3 things that describe a hare, 3 imagery pieces. It's larger than a rabbit. It has big ears and it's covered with fur. Great. That's a hare. Perfect. Versus somebody saying, oh, it's an animal. It has 2 eyes. It eats. It has a tail. I still don't know what animal it is, right? Like we have no idea. I need to really get that fine tuned. So you think about that animal game that we may have played when we were little. And you can do that with anything. You can just put it with a card on their head with a headband and have a word on it. The goal of the person giving the hints is to get the person to guess within 3 guesses. Give me 3 details that will help me guess this word. That helps them narrow down that imagery and really work that imagery. You can do imagery work from coming off of a vacation. Carrie, I know that you just went to the beach with your family. A great imagery activity would be before bedtime. Let's picture what we did on vacation. What was your favorite thing we did? Well, your child might say, we went to the aquarium. I love that. What did you see at the aquarium? Right? You're really getting them to tap in to that. What was in that? What did that fish look like? Did it have teeth? What was going? It's really just getting them to really zero in on some imagery work that will be great practice for all skills. Giving oral directions. This will be my last example. I know I've talked a lot and it's a long time to sit here, but Carrie, I'm going to have you be my example. Oral directions. Let's get ready for bed tonight. What I need you to do is I'm going to give you 3 things and I want you to go do them. I want you to go upstairs. I want you to put on your pajamas. I want you to go brush your teeth. And I want you to get in your bed and pick out the book you need and get in bed. Repeat back so image yourself doing all that. You got pictures of it? Okay, so give it to me. Tell me what you're going to do.
I'm going to go upstairs and put on my PJs and brush my teeth and get in bed.
Okay, what did you picture after brushing your teeth that you needed to do before you got into bed?
I don't have a picture for that. I don't know.
So I pictured that you would go pick out a book.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to
put it all back to me.
Go upstairs and I'm gonna get in my pink PJs and brush my teeth and pick out a book and get in bed.
Okay, perfect. And I'll meet you there. Go. Right. So I had her image herself, and then I questioned to that imagery. And even though I had to give it to her again, she's now put that into her imagery. Now, if she gets upstairs and she doesn't have the book, I'm going to ask the question again. So I see that you got your pajamas on. I see you went and did your teeth brushing. That is awesome. Thank you very much. What did you picture you should have done next?
Oh, I should have picked out a book.
Yeah, go do that real quick, right? So we're really and then continue to extend. You may have to start with just one oral direction, but then over time get two, then do three. And I would suggest practicing these types of oral directions all throughout the day where you feel like it's organically right. I would not do it during, oh my God, we're late for soccer. Hurry up and get your stuff together and get in the car, right? We're not doing this whole process then. But anytime that you can kind of fit that into your daily routine, and it makes organic sense to do that kind of work is worth that extra work of weaving it in through your day. I think the best times to engage a child with imagery is in those natural areas that you can engage instead of making it another school task, right?
So you
Because
kind of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but again, just listening to you talk, I think about our school day here. And, one of the things we're constantly doing at the end of the day is where's your water bottle? Where's your jacket? Where's your backpack? Is that another kind of natural place to be able to say, okay, picture yourself when you last had your water bottle? Let's picture what was happening and being able to like trigger and pull that in for, again, that executive functioning independence, keeping up with your things and just that kind of skill.
That's exactly right. Because if you think about it, that's what we all do. Think about you're in the bedroom wrapping presents and you realize you've run out of tape. You need to go get more tape. You go out into the living room to go get more tape, and your husband stops you and asks you what you're having for dinner. You tell him. Then you get to the kitchen where the tape is, and your daughter says, "What are we having for dinner?" You tell her. Then your son says, "Can I have a play date today?" You have that conversation. Then you get in the kitchen and go, "Why am I here?" Like you're standing there going, what am I here? You're looking for what you're doing. And a lot of times you can play back. Where was I? I was in the bedroom. I was wrapping presents, right? It comes back to you. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes life is so hectic that it doesn't. And it comes to you at 2 a.m, right? Your imagery showed up. It just showed up 6 hours too late. But that's how you can try to actively employ using that imagery. Note taking is one of those ways to re-cement imagery that for some people that's not in their where they need to be yet because they're little kids, but in that middle school area where you start taking notes, teaching and really spending time with your child of what they need to put in their notes. It's the things they can't image, right? If I have an image for what a hair is, I don't need to write down this intense definition about a hair. If you ask me questions about a hair, I'm going to be able to answer it because I already got that imagery there. But now they might talk about something I don't know. That's where I might have to do some imagery work. I don't want this fancy, in-depth definition. I want imagery that I can understand it. And I might even draw a picture.
That was going to be my next question, is being able to tap into some of that hands-on. Again, just thinking about our school, like we have the 3D printers where they may not have the picture of the cell themselves, but they're able to go into there and create it. Is that doing that hands-on still beneficial and building that image?
So beneficial because that real life experience, you're creating the imagery for them. And that's needed. We have to image everything. So we have to image the inside of a cell the same way that we image a basketball. Now it's easier to image a basketball because I can pick it up, I can feel it, I can touch it, I can do all those things. I don't get to do that with a cell, but I've got to do something to create that imagery for that child. So having access to a 3D printer that can help create that is amazing. Anytime you'll see teachers in class, good science teachers. I saw one at a school that was using a cup and then had all of these different items that they were like creating an actual inside of a cell of what it looked like. That's amazing. I don't remember the parts of a cell because I didn't make a good picture of that in school. So every time I have to look it up. I know the vocabulary for it, but I don't know what it really looks like. because I didn't really absorb that in the same way that I absorbed what happened in the Civil War. I could tell you
The
everything.
mitochondria is the powerhouse.
See, there you go. You remember that. Do you remember the Civil War though?
Oh, no, I don't know about that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, just again to be respectful of time, is I'm going to stop the recording. While we're still recording, Leanne, I just want to thank you for that presentation. I've got your contact information here if anybody does want to reach out with questions. But at this time, I'm going to stop the recording and just open the platform for some questions for our attendees here.